Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. I'm Jessica and today I'm joined once again by Tammy. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, Jessica.
I just said to you before we hit record, I'm really excited for this podcast. We've done one podcast together already. So for listeners that missed that one, please go back and listen to hear more about Tammy. But today, Tammy's sharing with us an area that she's got a lot of knowledge in, and that is around disordered eating. And when I asked Tammy about this, she actually sent me a whole hit list of points to discuss. And I thought, wow, we could definitely break this into a couple of podcasts, which I think we will, almost like its own little series. And I just was fizzing at what you had written down. I was like, wow, there's so much in this. This is going to be amazing. So, yeah, I'm really excited to dive into it. So let's start. Yeah, let's do it. I guess I just wanted to start, like, when we talk about disordered eating, like, I'll get you to explain a lot about what we mean by that as a concept overall and why we use that term. But I guess I wanted to flag straight up, and I'll make sure I write this in the context of the show notes, that if you've seen this as a topic or you're listening and you're like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, I think it's a really important listen for everyone. You'll find we're talking specifically to women today, but we see clinically that this is a space that I think every female to a point is living with in today's modern society, as far as like what food means and their relationship with their body and societal pressures. So I think I just wanted to like flag that straight up, that don't think, oh, no, this doesn't apply to me. Like, there will absolutely be gems within this. So that being said, if you heard the last podcast with Tammy, yes, she is the newest clinical nutritionist at the JCN clinic. But Tammy's also an eating psychology coach, which is really cool. So can you explain a little bit about that first, Tammy, and how that fits into you as a clinician, and a little bit about the eating psychology?
Yeah, absolutely. But just to touch upon what you shared a moment ago, that this really does apply to everyone. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about disordered eating, and I was telling her all the different types of disordered eating, and she said to me, well, that's everyone, which is really interesting. But so clinical nutrition looks at the body through a biological lens. So we're looking at nutrients, digestion, hormones, blood sugar, the gut, nervous system, sleep, stress, the whole body. Whereas from an eating psychology perspective, we're looking at the human behind food choices. So we're looking at what is a person's relationship with food, how do they feel inside their body, are they eating for nourishment or punishment? So is there control or guilt or fear or stress around food? And to me, the two, they have to go hand in hand together, because we are emotional, we're hormonal, we're sensory beings. And so if you were to give someone the perfect meal plan, but they are exhausted or overwhelmed or disconnected from their body, or they're carrying guilt or shame around food and they've got some toxic messaging around food, it will be hard for them to stick to that meal plan. So in my work, I'm not just focusing on what are you eating, which of course is really important, but how you're eating. And the two, as I said, go hand in hand.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I'm also curious, like, for maybe this is something that you'll get into. I was mentioning earlier about disordered eating as a sort of concept and title. Like, is that is essentially how you would describe it? Like, if you had to put a definition around disordered eating, I guess I should say actually that also in relationship to an eating disorder, because I know that was something we talked about prior to doing this podcast, like how they differ. But yeah, would you say that would be that sort of different line? Like, how would you define disordered eating versus like the difference to an eating disorder?
Yes, so rather than thinking about or talking about a clinically diagnosed eating
Yeah.
disorder like anorexia nervosa or bulimia, which would need to be treated under the guidance of a medical practitioner, I'm talking about somebody that has a more complicated relationship with food. So, for example, it could look like somebody that has a lot of food noise. Food is taking up too much space in their mind. They're constantly thinking about what they ate or what they should eat or what to avoid. I've had clients tell me that they lay awake at night, just going over and over what they ate that day, and unable to sleep, thinking about the guilt and the shame around that. It could look like someone that has a cycle of restriction and binge eating. So someone that's very, very controlled with what they eat in the day, but then they find themselves overeating or binging at night. And not necessarily because of the lack of discipline, but because the body and nervous system are responding to deprivation or emotional suppression. It could look like when food rules become stronger than body wisdom. So eating very strictly in accordance to calories or macros or fasting windows, always with their apps and the plans and clean eating, which does have its place. But if it's happening at the same time of ignoring hunger, ignoring fullness, ignoring satisfaction, ignoring their energy levels or their mood, then it's become a little bit too rigid. Or, for example, if somebody is really anxious when food is unpredictable. I've had also clients talk to me about this, where they really need to know when the next meal is coming or what they're going to eat. They've got to really be sure about what they're eating. So going to a restaurant or traveling, eating at someone's house, or a spontaneous meal can be really, really stressful. Emotional eating is a big one, where food is used to soothe stress or loneliness, boredom, eating in secrecy, eating differently when you're alone compared to when you're with other people, hiding foods, hiding wrappers, feeling embarrassed about what you've eaten, chronic yo-yo dieting. And sometimes it can be a way of eating that looks very socially acceptable from the outside. I talk about this as like wellness perfectionism or orthorexia, that pursuit of health, but it's become too strict. It's become too rigid. There's labels around good food and bad food, and they're just living under constant food surveillance.
Yeah, that is a huge hit list, I think, similar to what you said your friend said. I find it really fascinating too, with respect to like how this can cross over into what we do as practitioners, particularly working in the gut health space, because we do deal with a lot of clients who are potentially dealing with underlying, say, food intolerances, reactivities, or if there is like chronic dysbiosis or SIBO or something of the like, there can be reactivity to, say, FODMAPs, for an example. Like, how do we, this is a really hard question, and I don't expect you to have the perfect answer, because this is something as practitioners we're always having to juggle, but how do we deal with creating these rules around food? Or maybe the word isn't rules, like we have these particular guidelines that we're using for clients or people who are listening who are like, well, I've got an intolerance to these foods, or I can't eat X, Y, and Z because I'll be in pain or have symptoms. Like, how do we unpack that and then make sure that that's not leading into this sort of disordered relationship? Like, I feel you sort of spoke to that, I guess, as far as like how much it's taking over. But yeah, I'm curious as to how you see that, because I feel like it can be a really hard place to pick apart.
That's a good question. And I always frame it with clients when I am, putting them on an elimination diet or taking out certain foods, is that this is not necessarily a forever thing. And, if we think about, I think what often happens with people is that when there is disordered eating, they can get very, very rigid and stay eating a certain way for a really long time. And maybe that way of eating them was serving them for a point. And we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but food rules and control can actually be beneficial for people at certain times in their life, because it can bring a sense of safety when they actually feel unstable. But it's when food rules and rigidity around food goes beyond that. And so it's about having this understanding that one way of eating isn't necessarily going to be a forever thing. We might be doing an elimination diet while we're doing some gut protocols, and then we can start slowly reintroducing. And maybe there are some foods that then they can tolerate. But also it's about working on the nervous system at the same time, so that if there is underlying reasons for that person to become really rigid or stuck around food, then we're working on that as well. So for example, digestion is a really big one, because there can be real reasons that they need to take out those foods. It's actually causing reactions. But we actually also can look at how are they digesting life, like have things happened in their past that have caused them to become stuck? Are they storing those emotions within their body? And so then it's about actually looking at what are they holding on to? What are their stress patterns? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, definitely. I love how you explained that. Particularly, I like what you said about these actual guidelines can actually serve us at certain points, but it's then how we move through them. And I think from what I've seen too with clients over the years, it's like, how those guidelines can be helpful, but their ability then to move through them with ease and move away from them. Because I mean, in this space in particular, when you find a way of eating that feels like it's safe, it can be sometimes quite hard when we're then asking you, okay, now we're going to move the goalposts, and we want to move into a place that you might associate with fear. But but there's so much more, as you just explained, that can be underlying that, which is beyond just like how they're thinking, perhaps about the symptoms or the food in itself. Like it's the deeper components about their own maybe safety within themselves.
And I think if we think about food through the lifespan as well, it is always changing. What we ate in infancy, what we ate in childhood, what we ate in adulthood, it changed, around fertility and pregnancy and postpartum, food changes. And so I often like to have conversations with clients about your diet might change. It might need to change depending on, do you need more of a therapeutic diet? Do you need more of a healing diet? Do you need more of a building diet? Do you need more of a replenishing diet? What is it that your body needs at this time of your life? Do you need an elimination diet? Maybe that's what you need. So it's about the diet for the phase and having some understanding that phase does change.
So true. Yeah, I'll often use the terminology of like a therapeutic diet with clients in this space, like really emphasizing this is a tool that we're using like a supplement for now,
right.
for this period of time, but this is not a long-term approach.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why does food get so loaded and emotional for women? Not every, I shouldn't generalize. I'm sure there's women out there that it perhaps doesn't affect, but for many, many women, why is this such a problem?
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a few reasons that I want to touch upon. But I think it's important to say that food is emotional because we are emotional beings. We want to get enjoyment from our food. It's not very fun to sit down and just have a really bland, unemotional meal, right? So we are emotional. And food is one of the earliest forms of comfort. So from infancy, nourishment is linked with being held, soothed, cared for, responded to. So it makes sense that later in life, food can become connected to safety or love or comfort. and then, you know, becomes a way to suppress emotions. And I share this really with no judgment, just as an observation. But I do see it often in parenting, where a child, for example, has fallen down and hurt themselves, and the parent or carer says, "It's okay, don't cry, I'll give you an ice cream, or I'll give you a chocolate." And then you see, okay, aha, this is where food becomes emotional. I feel pain, I feel upset, and I'm going to soothe that with sugar, or, you know, a treat food. We're putting labels around food. And so that's how food becomes comfort. But it also becomes emotional with restriction, because if there is restriction, food can become an obsession. The body's always looking for balance, right? That yin, that yang, always trying to maintain a homeostasis. So if we deprive the body, we undereat, if we skip meals or fast too long or cut out entire food groups when it's not necessarily helpful, the brain then becomes preoccupied with food. And that's when the binging happens. So I worked with a client a while ago who, she was really big in intermittent fasting. She was, I think, in her mid-50s. And she'd been intermittent fasting for a long period of time, really strict in the day. But then at night, when her husband and her kids were asleep, she found herself sneaking into the kitchen and, you know, couldn't really stop snacking. And so we talked about the rebel archetype. You know, if you're the good girl archetype in the day, the rebel archetype coming out at night. And so that's one part of it. The body's, you know, gonna swing the other way if you're too rigid in one way. But the other part of it is that if she's snacking at night when nobody else is around, and she had shared that, you know, there was a bit of intimacy issues with her husband. You know, they've been married for a really long time. Well, we started discussing, did she need something else at night? Did she need some more emotional connection or physical connection with her husband? Was she feeling lonely? Did she need to be seen? Did she need to be heard? Maybe just having a conversation with him around that and getting a cuddle could actually feed that desire, feed that need that wasn't currently being met. Yeah.
Wow. There was two examples I thought of as well, and some of these have been what I've seen in clients, and I can even think about and relate to a little bit myself. And that is, again, no judgment, but parents definitely in that sort of now, you know, that boomer age where when they grew up, it was like all about like eating everything and food being scarce. And so, or their parents, I should say, like off the back of wars and so forth. So I know for myself and a lot of clients in my sort of age bracket, there was a lot of like, you can't leave the table until you finish everything on your plate. And that was a really, really big food rule. And I know that was something that I definitely had in my sort of mind around my relationship with food, that I used to think I had to always eat everything. And I would always, after leaving home in my early 20s, I would dish up like a big meal and I would just eat it and be really, really uncomfortable all the time. But I just thought I was like, I couldn't stop. I thought I just had to eat that. But again, like I didn't understand that at the point, but I can look back on it now and go, oh, that was just because you had a belief system that you had to eat everything. And I think that I see that in a lot of clients. And the other thing I was thinking about too, but I think it sort of weaves into what you're talking about, is I see a lot of women where it's like the food, there's like a punishment sort of wrapped up in it. I'm trying to think how to describe it, in that you were talking about that client of yours with like maybe the binging at night. And I don't know if this applied to her per se, but it's like binging and then the beating the self up afterwards. So it's like there's been something upsetting in your life that's got nothing to do with food. Food is it's the soother, but it's also the punishment, because it's like, well, it's like I feel good in that moment, but then afterwards I can beat myself up more. And it's like, well, an extra reason to go into like a self-loathing space. I see that a lot.
Yeah,
too.
I see that a lot too. And I think for women especially, there's a lot of judgment and criticism around, you know, if I've, people could say falling off the wagon, or, you know, again, I see this, you know, well-intentioned people with making tiny comments, and then that becomes a belief system. So even the other day I was in an exercise class, it was Easter, and the instructor said, you know, come on, we've got to earn those Easter eggs.
Oh,
you know, and I was just so he doesn't know who in the class you know has some eating disorder or disordered eating, that then is going to beat themselves up for eating the Easter egg because they didn't, you know, work hard enough, you know. So it's these little comments, and they're heard everywhere, again from well-intentioned people, but they layer up and layer up and layer up, and that's the voice inside your head that you've been bad, you've eaten the wrong thing, and there's that spiral of shame and blame and judgment and criticism.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting because when you talk about the woman who eats the food, that chocolate at night because they've had a bad day, that may be the only pleasure that she's getting.
Yes.
Right. So food, we talk about food being emotional, it's pleasurable. And in that moment, she was seeking pleasure. She was seeking, and pleasure takes us out of that stress response. But then the next piece is that she's adding a whole new layer of stress by blaming herself and shaming herself.
Exactly. Yeah. Not being able to just have that chocolate after dinner, sitting on the couch, kids are in bed, and have a bit of chocky and just feel like no judgment about it. Like, I just had my chocolate. That's it. Yeah. So I feel you've spoken a bit about this already, but with anything else you wanted to add, like, how do women become disconnected from their bodies' signals, or these little perhaps subtle signals, whether that is around, like, that you mentioned earlier about feeling hungry or fullness? I guess I just spoke to that in my early 20s, not really listening to those signals at all. So how does this happen? And again, perhaps you've already spoken to some of those signals.
So the body's always communicating with us through sensations. So sensations of hunger, sensations of fullness, thirst, tiredness, etc., etc. That's how the body speaks to us, subtly at first, and then if we're ignoring, it gets louder and louder, and this is where we start to get symptoms. But for many women, and this is definitely my story as well, is that we get very practiced at overriding sensation. So, you know, tiredness especially, very easy to override, but also overriding sadness or anger, you know, to show up as the good girl, the people pleaser, not wanting to disappoint anyone, or just overriding your own feelings because it's the idea that everybody else's needs are more important than your own. And so over time, that inner listening system gets quieter and quieter. And this is where interoception comes in, which is our ability to sense what's happening on the inside. It's how we know I'm hungry or how we know I'm full. And in my own case, I didn't know that there was a spectrum of hunger and fullness. I thought starving was hungry. And I also didn't know that feeling fine was not an emotion, was not a feeling. So I was completely disconnected to my feelings, and also very disconnected to my hunger and fullness cues. And so when food becomes emotional and those signals get blurred, a woman might interpret anxiety as hunger or comfort, for example. She might feel exhausted and crave sugar because her body's looking for energy and relief. And she might eat past fullness because food is giving her something that she hasn't received all day, and that softness, that comfort, that pleasure. And so from an eating psychology point of view, we're not asking how to stop this behavior, but we're looking at what is this behavior trying to tell me? Because our food behavior is not the enemy. We don't really want to make it wrong. I like to see it as the messenger. So if somebody's spent a long time overriding their body, she might not notice fullness until she's really, really uncomfortable. And she may not know tiredness until she crashes. So it's not about adding more rules or more control, but actually inviting more softness. What am I feeling? What do I need? Is this hunger, or is it that I need something else? And starting to get really curious around your feelings. And it may be just starting to like write down what you feel in the moment. That was something I had to do because I was so disconnected to all of my emotions that I had to really start to get to know myself a bit more.
Wow. What do you mean too? You said earlier that you did, I think, don't let me get this wrong, that you said you felt that being fine, feeling fine did you say wasn't as an emotion?
It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's not a feeling.
It's not a feeling. Yeah. What do you mean by that? Just to explain.
So it was actually a therapist that taught me that, because I would go into the session and she would say to me, how are you feeling? And I'd say, fine. But fine is not a feeling. You can't, where do you feel? So when you have a feeling, there's an emotion attached to it, and you can start to identify where you feel that in your body. So for example, if you're feeling anxious, you might associate that with like some maybe sensation, which we sometimes call butterflies in your tummy. If you're feeling, love, you might feel something in your heart. You might feel, your smile and warmth in your face. But with the word fine, you can't really describe that. And so a big part of getting to know your feelings and emotions is start to notice what actually you feel, where the sensations are in your body. If you're feeling anger, what are you feeling? Maybe you're feeling like a bit of constriction in your chest, or if you're feeling sadness, maybe you're feeling constriction in your throat. So you can start to name the feeling and identify the emotion within the body.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I just hadn't thought about it that way. That's really fascinating. It's almost like it's a mask. I don't know whether that makes sense, but the way you're describing it's like saying I'm fine. It's like a mask for what? I mean, so many of us say it too.
It's 100% a mask.
Yeah, it is a mask.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
What does it fine mean? When we actually start to break it down. And there's a book which I often share with my clients by Brene Brown called Atlas of the Heart. Have you read it?
I know Brene Brown, but I haven't read it. No.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
So Atlas of the Heart is about giving names to emotions, because the premise of the book is that we don't have enough language to describe what we're feeling. And actually, if we develop that language, we can actually explain ourselves a little bit better and communicate our needs more effectively.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I'm having some light bulb moments here, and I knew that would happen.
Share with me what's going on.
No, I'm thinking about how often I use the word fine, but I'm also thinking about people in my life. There's actually someone that I like, someone I love dearly as a friend, who is just almost always, when she's talking about things in her life, but she'll finish it with, oh, but it's fine. Like always, like it's fine at the end. And I've always like found that interesting, because it's like, no, you're just disregarding everything that you just said by saying it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like listening to that in sort of like a deeper level. Yeah. So one of the things, this really was an interesting one for me, because obviously you sent me through some of these talking points after we had that first chat, and you talked about here about the connection between food, the body, and a women's disconnection from the feminine. This is a space that I will admit is just not my arena. Like, I don't really know much about this. So yeah, talk to me about that. Like, what do you mean when
What
you
do I
talk
mean?
about
Yeah.
I'm going in just as blind as everyone else, because it's
This
not
is
my
my
space.
favorite.
I know, yeah,
favorite part of the conversation.
I know, right? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think especially because I'm so passionate about women's hormones and reproduction. But so to clarify, when I'm talking about the feminine or feminine energy, I'm talking about the qualities that are more feminine. So we all, both men and women, have masculine energy and feminine energy, right? And the feminine energy is receptivity, intuition, sensuality, pleasure. It's more emotional, it's more spiral, softer, follows a rhythm, creativity, whereas the masculine energy is more linear, it's more logical, it's numbers and rationale and directness and doing, right? It's that pushing through, it's that doing. That's what I'm referring to with the masculine energy, and both are necessary. When we're working, you're running a business, you will need that masculine energy. It's helpful. But it quite often, when a woman has disordered eating or a disconnection from her body, she is too far into that masculine energy and has become disconnected from the feminine energy. So, if we're thinking about counting calories and measuring and following rigid food rules, that is a masculine way of living. And so we can think about food being deeply connected to the feminine, because food is the most basic way we receive. We take it in, we soften, we digest, we allow ourselves to be nourished. So really, the act of eating is a feminine energy, if you want to think of it like that. And if we have the idea of the concept that our relationship with food is a mirror of our relationship with life, which is an important principle in the eating psychology space, if a woman cannot receive food without guilt, where else is she unable to receive? Can she receive support? Does she allow herself to receive rest or pleasure? So, for example, can she receive something without immediately feeling that she hasn't earned it and needs to, burn it off or justify or give something back? And you see this a lot with mothers. It's very challenging to accept help without feeling that they need to reciprocate or, owe somebody something. And then as well, if we think about appetite, not specifically just about food, but appetite as a life force, appetite as desire, as wanting, and how many women are disconnected from that with, having their needs expressed or shared and communicated, or saying, this is my yes, this is my no, I want more of this. And so if a woman is suppressing appetite, she's suppressing more than just hunger. She's suppressing a part of herself that has needs and desires and intuition. And so that's what I mean about the feminine energy around food. And also, we're looking at this from a hormonal perspective. When a woman is constantly pushing and doing and living in an overly masculine state, ignoring her needs, ignoring emotions, this can reflect a stress pattern. Yeah. So the body then moves into survival chemistry. This might mean more cortisol, more adrenaline through the body. It can affect insulin. It can suppress thyroid function. It can disrupt ovulation and then lower progesterone. So progesterone is produced after ovulation, and it's deeply connected to that calm state, mood stability, nervous system resilience, that second softer half of the cycle. But if a woman is not ovulating well because she's underfed, she's been overstressed, she's overtrained, she's depleted, she's just push through, then progesterone can drop. And so hormonally, then she'll feel less calm, less connected, less sensual, and less emotional stable. And a lot of women see that in that second half of the cycle. You know, they notice that they're way more emotional. They cry for no reason. And so this is all part of it.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack.
And it's also, I know, I understand and appreciate you're condensing that down too, because it's like, so I'm sure so much more. I so get what you're saying, like particularly, how you explain that and those sort of deeper levels of like food and digestion, and like how it becomes more about how, not just how you are with food, but like on those levels with how you are to yourself, like, and how you're expressing yourself in your day-to-day and within the world. I think that we're just having an honest conversation here. I think the element that I find hard about this, and this says a lot about me more so when you're explaining it, I think what I find hard is the feminine to masculine terms. I feel like I totally, it's not that I totally see it, but it's more like I wish they had different names. But then maybe that says things about me, because it's like the feminine being like everything that is the softness, and the male being like the get shit done, you know, like, but then maybe that says a lot about me, that I live a lot, obviously, in that masculine energy. But I'm like, why this, do you know what, I think it's a completely different thing as far as like, well, can we have a different name? So they're not like about our like they're not gendered. But then I guess that's also the point. Like, I don't know.
It's not gendered because we have both within.
Yeah. But do you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, you could call it like the sun energy and moon energy, if that.
Yeah, I think that's what I feel like that's what my brain needs. But I also understand you're probably hearing me say that and going, oh, Jess, that says so much about you.
No, not at all. You have to use and this goes back to what I was saying before about language can be really helpful for you to understand concepts. And so, sun and moon, or winter, summer, spring, you know, whatever language resonates.
Yeah. Most. See, instantly when you explain it like that, I'm like, love it. Fine. But I get that that's my own stuff that I bring to the table. But like as you're explaining all of that, I'm like, I'm getting why I haven't dug deeper into this myself, because I think I've riled against it in my own head, as far as like the sort of construct of genders. I've brought that to the table with it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, especially in these times where there's a lot of conversation and unhelpful language around sexuality and gender can get very confusing. Yeah. But we're not talking about gender. Yeah. At all. It's just qualities. So if you need different names for those qualities, like sun and moon. Yeah. The moon changing every day, you know, the look of the moon changing, that's really what I'm speaking to.
No, for sure.
The sun is the same shape every day. So really that's the energies that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Thanks for therapy, Tammy. So we're going to move into our final question, but this is not a final for this whole area as such. As I said, we're going to definitely be doing more in this area, because I feel like we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. So for women who have been listening, who feel that disconnection from their food and their body and even their own intuition, what are some of the steps that they can take? What are these first steps? Because this is a obviously quite complex area. Let's leave our listeners maybe with some steps.
Yeah, because it can seem like a lot. And so the first step is really just awareness and curiosity, and slowing down with yourself, to pause and notice. And through time and practice, you'll be able to do this earlier and earlier, to understand, what are you feeling? Are you hungry? When you feel the sensations of hunger, and you can even number it, like on a scale of 1 to 10, if numbers are helpful. 10 being completely full, 1 being starving. Where on that scale do you sit? Easier places to start than food is just, am I tired? And again, with that scale, what level of tiredness are you at? And starting to ask questions, like, am I eating for nourishment, or am I eating for another reason? And so really that's the first place, to just become curious and to inquire within yourself for what are your habits, because it's only through that awareness that lasting change can happen, without forcing and adding more rules.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, the question is, what is my body trying to tell me? And I had a client the other day, very controlled around food, and the question we decided together is, can you trust yourself? Like, can you just allow yourself to trust yourself? To make the choices. And to kind of relinquish some of that control and just trust yourself to make the choices.
Yeah, which is a big question in its own right. Like, it's sometimes there's these questions that seem like they're not, but they actually are. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's quite loaded.
Yeah.
Because it seems like it should be as simple.
It's holding the space for that. Not necessarily to have an answer, but just holding the space for, well, what happens if I do this, or if I do this?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think this is a space too that working with someone is generally more beneficial? Well, of course it's beneficial. That's not really worded the right way, but like people trying to work through this on their own, do you think that it is something that's achievable to work through on their own? Or usually you think that from your experience, having guidance has been or is quite crucial?
I think having somebody to support you through it and talk about what you're going through can be really helpful, because sometimes a practitioner that's trained in this space can see things that you might not think about. So, for example, I had a client a very long time ago who was a mum with a young child, and was very, very overwhelmed with the motherhood and just the demands of life, being a mother, the cleaning, the cooking. It was just really overwhelming for her. And she really wanted to lose weight. She was quite overweight. And she found that when she was on her own, she would go for a drive and she would end up at a drive-through takeout. And no matter how much she tried, she just couldn't not end up there. It was just the place that she would just always go. And then, she felt like she had a willpower problem and didn't really know how to move through that. But when we started to break it down, and this is why it can be really useful to work with someone, is when you start to break it down, what was happening is that was an escape for her. That's what that meant. That was freedom. So going on that drive and getting that takeaway was freedom, where she hadn't felt that anywhere else in her life. And so then we've brought awareness to it, and we can get curious at how do we find that freedom how do we bring freedom into her life in other places that is not where she needs to go to find it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Actually, you reminded me of a client of mine at the moment that does a very similar thing that will be really helpful conversation. I think in some ways we've come at it from the point of view that you're explaining, but probably not so succinctly. So I'm like clocking that for next time we talk.
And it just goes back to, we're not ever making the behavior wrong, because it usually is a messenger. It's usually telling us what we need. We just have to interpret it correctly. And that's why working with someone can help you interpret your behavior, and then provide you with tools and resources to change it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the last thing I'd say too is that often when you are working with someone too, and you feel like, say what was the saying that you used before? I can't think of what it is that people will often say about them, like falling off the wagon. Yeah, I've fallen off the wagon, or like I haven't done things. I haven't done what Tammy asked me to do, or I haven't done what Jess, asked me to do. And then like canceling appointments and like wanting to come back with just like the positive feedback. And I feel like those times like are way more crucial to have, as you're saying, that person to talk to and to break it down and to look at it as learnings, like to be like, no, it's not, nothing bad has happened. Like this is part of life. Like this is us learning, like, let's look at this, let's understand it, and let's like figure out what this means. But yeah, I think sometimes I'll see that quite a lot where it's like when you are working with someone, it's like, I just want to come back with the good stuff. I don't want, I guess this comes back to shame again, a shame in admitting that something hasn't gone as to how they would have liked.
Yeah. And this is where, again, when you work with a practitioner where you feel safe enough to show all parts of yourself, because, and again, this is almost like the feminine masculine thing, the sun and moon is like your shadow parts, right? The shadow parts that you don't ever want to show up, because you're showing up, as I said before, as the good girl, the people pleaser, not actually expressing your needs. And so when you feel seen and when you feel heard with a practitioner, that allows all those parts of yourself to come into the session, right? We talk about archetypes, the good girl and the rebel. The rebel needs to be there too. It goes back to what we were saying before, that feeling fine as a mask, because part of yourselves is probably disconnected and not allowed to be seen. And that's why when you work with someone where you can bring all parts of yourself to the session, you're going to really have some profound change. And some breakthroughs.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Again, I think we've just touched that tip of the iceberg. I know one of the things too you mentioned you want to talk about, which I'm keen for us to dive into next time, is about GPL1s and their relationship in this space. And I know that there's a lot of listeners with questions around that. And you and I, as clinicians, have definitely been dealing with this with our clients. Before we finish and I let you go, and I'm dropping this on you again, but last time I asked you about recommendations. There was something that you said to me afterwards, and you're like, I'll recommend that next time. And I cannot remember what it was. I don't know if you do.
I'm going to share it again because I'm still listening to the podcast and you need to listen to it, and so do the listeners.
I wrote it down.
So I'm obsessed at the moment with the podcast called The Telepathy Tapes.
That's right. Yes.
So everybody go and listen to that. It's a podcast about a woman who is also producing a documentary, and she worked with this neuroscientist who had been working with children with autism and discovered that they have amazing gifts such as telepathy, which is just the tip of the iceberg with their gifts. and completely has blown my mind
Mm.
around autistic people. So yeah, I encourage everybody to go and listen to that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely this time, Jessica, you were doing this because I need to listen. Uh, I had one I wanted to talk about. And then just when you said that again, I was like, oh, I have to just quickly say, unless people are under a rock, like I'm sure they've seen it everywhere. But if you haven't seen the latest season of Love on the Spectrum, please do yourself a favor and watch it, because it is the most beautiful, heartwarming show I've ever seen. And I'm just like obsessed with, so yeah, I think everyone on that show, but oh, it's just beautiful. It's just like, I feel like it's everything about humans that we need to be, or we need to have more of, as far as that complete authenticity and just like ability just to express how we feel and love. Like, I just bawl my eyes out watching that show. It's so beautiful. But what I was going to recommend was actually a recipe that is an older one on the website that I've just been doing over and over again lately. This is common, where I'll just forget something and then come back to it. So it's this, and I'll put it in the show notes with also the podcast that Tammy recommended. It's sticky ginger tofu. And it's really easy. It's like 5 minutes to throw it all together, and then it's in the oven, and the magic happens while we just put some rice on, and it's just tofu cooked up in lots of ginger and tamari and a little bit of honey. Like, it's so simple, but it is crazy delicious. So if you're looking for a way to bring tofu into your life, because a lot of clients we talk to don't really dabble much with that space, this is a really good place to start. So that's my reco.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. Thanks again, Tammy. This has been so good. And to all of the listeners, yeah, if you'd like to connect with Tammy or just want to know more, absolutely head to our socials, reach out to us at the JCN Clinic podcast. Reach out to us at the JCN Clinic. We're always here to answer any questions. And as I said, I'll put all the details in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a share in your socials, because that helps other people find us. And I'm sure if you're listening, you'll thought this was an absolute gem. So share away. But otherwise, thank you, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.